It's time for the whole 9 yards. Hello, everyone. I'm Ralph Ventre here in the NEC Front Row studio. I hope you're all doing fine as we arrive at week 9 of the FCS schedule. 3 games on the docket. All 3 are Northeast Conference contests. We have Duquesne on a bye week. We have 2 rivals set to square off in our NEC featured matchup on ESPN3. Let's talk all about this Week 9 slate in the opening drive. Kicking off the opening drive in New Britain, Connecticut, Wagner visiting CCSU. The Seahawks coming off a bye. Despite that bye, running back Ryan Foles still sits atop the FCS leaderboard in total rushing yards. Now, CCSU has an elite ball carrier as well. Drew Jean-Guillaume, over 140 rush yards in each of Central's 3 NEC games. He's averaging 9 yards per carry against NEC opponents this season. Jean-Guillaume is one of the keys to the NEC's top-ranked offense. The Blue Devils averaging 3 rushing touchdowns per game, 6.7 yards per offensive snap. And needless to say, Wagner head coach Jason Hotaling has watched plenty of tape, and he's been plenty impressed with the CCSU offense thus far this season.
I think on the offensive side of the ball, they might be one of the best offenses in the country. I think numbers-wise they are, but just everything they do, they run a lot of different motions. They do a lot of different split zone type stuff. And Pete and Ryan have been together for a while, going back to their Albany days. So whenever you have a quarterback that's been in the same system for 4 years, it's a dangerous deal. And he's surrounded by a ton of really good skill players, but it starts up front, just like in any offense, and their offensive line is a very good offensive line. They're sound, they're coached well, they're physical.
Now, you heard Coach Haas refer to that CCSU offensive line. That's a unit that has allowed a league-low 6 sacks in 8 games this season. Something to watch for on Saturday is, will that CCSU offensive line be able to neutralize the Wagner pass rush led by linebacker Cam Gill? Gill was recently added to the Stats FCS Buck Buchanan Award watch list. He ranks 3rd in the FCS with 8 total sacks this season. Will he be able to keep the heat on CCSU's quarterback, Jacob Dogala? You'll find the answer to that and more Saturday, 12 noon, right here on NEC Front Row. Seahawks and the Blue Devils in an important conference contest. We're moving out to Moon Township, Pennsylvania for the second of 3 NEC battles on the Week 9 docket. This one will feature a pair of Keystone State rivals, Robert Morris and St. Francis, both teams looking for their first conference victory of the season. First, taking a closer look at Robert Morris, and the Colonials have to be happy with the offensive success they've experienced in the first year under head coach Bernard Clark Jr. RMU tight end Matthew Gonzalez has developed into an elite pass-catching option for the Colonials. He has 10 touchdown receptions already on the season. That ties Robert Morris's single-season program record that was set back in 2005 by Tawan Massey. Now, in addition to the production Robert Morris has gotten from Gonzalez, they've watched 2 newcomers settle in nicely to the running back position. Terence Stevens and Elijah Jackson have become quite the tandem. They combined for 288 rush yards in last week's win over Central State and we'll talk more about this dynamic duo later on in today's show. Flipping it over to the St. Francis side, where Chris Valerio's Red Flash have endured plenty of heartbreak thus far this season. All 5 of SFU's losses were by 1 score. In 3 of the losses, SFU led in the fourth quarter. In another loss, they were tied in the fourth quarter. And then, of course, the season opening loss at Lehigh, they trailed by 2 points. Game-winning field goal attempt was blocked with under a minute to go. So 5 tough losses for the Flash, including 2 in conference play. But the fact of the matter is, this is still a dangerous unit with a pair of prime receivers on the outside. Cyrus Holder, 2 receiving touchdowns in last week's setback to Duquesne. Cam Lewis had a few catches as well. Of course, we've seen what he can do over the years. He set the NEC single-season receiving record as a sophomore. And now Holder and Lewis, they'll pose a tough test for that RMU defense, which has allowed opponents to complete more than 65% of pass attempts. Also, Colonial's opponents averaging more than 2 pass TDs per game. We'll see if they'll be able to tighten up and contain the 2 dynamic receiving threats, St. Francis' Cyrus Holder and Cameron Lewis. You can watch the Keystone State Clash unfold live for free right here on NEC Front Row. Now it's on to the featured matchup that you'll see live on ESPN3. Bryant visiting Sacred Heart. If it's anything like last year's game, we're in for some high-flying fun on Saturday in Fairfield. Last year's meeting between Bryant and Sacred Heart was the highest-scoring non-overtime game in the NEC last season, 93 points between the 2 sides. The Bulldogs and Pioneers combined for 1,061 yards of offense in that classic. Now, yes, circumstances change from year to year, but the fact of the matter is both quarterbacks who accounted for monster performances last year are back leading their offenses this season. In fact, Price Wilson of Bryant and Sacred Heart's Kevin Duke are the top 2 ranked passers in the NEC as we head into Week 9. Both are coming off outstanding outings in Week 8. Price Wilson threw for 380 yards. Kevin Duke set the NEC single-game season high for total offense, 413 yards in last week's victory. He was responsible for 4 touchdowns, all 4 of Sacred Heart's touchdowns in the road win over defending NEC champ CCSU. So on paper, there could be plenty of offensive fireworks in this one. One other game within this game to keep an eye on: will Sacred Heart's offensive line be able to keep Kevin Duke clean and upright? The reason for the question is the fact that Sacred Heart will go up against Bryant's sack-happy defense. The Bulldogs lead the conference with 22 sacks this season. Tomas Wright leads the FCS, 9.5 quarterback takedowns. Will Bryant's pass rush continue to play up to the high level? You'll find out about that and more in our NEC Game of the Week on ESPN3. Paul Dottino, Kevin Gilbride, John Schmelk on the call. I think it's going to be a good one, and so does Bryant head coach James Perry.
Yeah, well, nothing's going to come easy. So we're certainly anticipating a tremendous challenge. And, I think we played really well last year, and that was actually when we definitely were on the upswing as far as our performance as a team. So, we'll need it. That's for sure. We'll need a great effort this week to have a chance. So, yeah, that'll be fun.
Now, after that nice, methodical, successful opening drive, why don't you join me in taking a look at the NEC stock market? I'll tell you whose value is on the way up. Now, Bryant wide receiver Tom Kennedy certainly isn't an unknown commodity. Last year, he was an all-conference first-team performer in both the sports of football and men's lacrosse. 12 total touchdowns for the Bulldogs last year. He was a preseason All-NEC pick at wide receiver, but he missed the season's first 4 games due to injury. Bryant began easing their star wide receiver back into the lineup in the first week of October. Now in his 3rd game back, he exploded. Kennedy set Bryant's single-game program record with 13 receptions in the victory at Fordham, 221 receiving yards. On the 3rd play from scrimmage, he caught a 51-yard bomb down the sideline. Then, on Bryant's final play from scrimmage, he gained 16 yards over the middle to set up the game-winning field goal. As Bryant head coach James Perry points out, the Bulldogs certainly missed Kennedy's production on the field, but that wasn't all that was missing with the star receiver's absence.
He is just an absolute warrior for us. He practices so hard. There was a point in the season, I think I mentioned this, that as much as we missed him on Saturdays, we almost missed him more on Tuesdays. He elevates everybody's practice ethic so much. And then to get him rewarded, his rehab was so intense, and now he's practicing so hard for us, and each week he gets a little better, a little stronger.
One more note on Kennedy about his performance last week. He was the first Bryant receiver to go over 200 yards in a game since Jordan Harris in 2012. You may remember Harris as a former NEC Offensive Player of the Year. He also signed an NFL free agent rookie contract after graduation. Not bad company to be in for Tom Kennedy. There's no doubt that this man's stock is on the way up. I'm taking the Twitter timeout. Let's take a look at this tweet sheet where Hero Sports FCS appropriately gave a shout out to former Jerry Rice Award winner A.J. Hines. Duquesne's running back went over 215 yards from scrimmage for the 2nd week in a row. He piled up 256 yards in a 27-20 win over SFU, a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown in that one. The native North Carolinian, who was voted the FCS's top freshman back in 2016, he's played in 7 games thus far this season, 10 rushing touchdowns. That's 5th in the FCS. That's 10 rushing touchdowns in just 7 games, because if you'll remember, he sat out the Hawaii game due to injury, but he came back for the start of NEC play, and in 3 conference contests, he has 6 rushing touchdowns. It's quite clear that A.J. Hines has kicked it into high gear. He's getting it done. You know it. We know it. Hero Sports knows it. That's our Twitter timeout. Blue 42, Omaha, Omaha. It's time for the NEC Audible. Now, A.J. Hines and the Duquesne Dukes are going on the bye week. Meanwhile, Wagner is coming off its bye week to visit CCSU. Now, what exactly happens during that quote-unquote week off? Well, Wagner head coach Jason Hotelling explains.
Really focus on yourself. You look at what you've done really well the first 7 weeks and what you haven't done well, and you try and correct certain things. You know, you go back to fundamentals, offensively, defensively, special teams. You know, you do some drills that you did in camp maybe as far as, you know, blocking, tackling, stuff like that. So it's really just a back to the basics type week. Use it a little bit to get some guys healthy. You know, some guys of ours have taken a lot of reps, so maybe we limited them in practice and got the 2s and 3s some more work. You know, but you really just try and better yourself as a program.
That's amazing, bro. What has me in a state of amazement this week? Well, it's that Robert Morris running back tandem that I mentioned earlier in the opening drive. Terence Stevens with 135 yards in the win over Central State. Reigning Rookie of the Week, Elijah Jackson, 153 yards on the ground in that victory. And together, they became the Colonials' first 2 100-yard rushers in the same game since 1997. Now, Stevens, who also has shown his prowess in the kick return game, he went over 200 all-purpose yards in Week 8, and he is now #1 on the FCS leaderboard in all-purpose yards per game, over 175 per outing. Now, on the other hand, it's Elijah Jackson. You may remember him from the Stock Rising segment in last week's show. Well, after being featured, he went off again. He has gained over 100 yards on the ground in 3 of his last 4 outings. Robert Morris's Terence Stevens is the all-purpose yards leader in the FCS. Rookie Elijah Jackson is on the Jerry Rice Award watch list. They're piling up the yardage, and stats amazing. So that'll do it for the Week 9 edition of the Whole 9 Yards. 2 games on NEC Front Row kicking off at noon Saturday. Then 1 o'clock Eastern Time, Sacred Heart against Bryant on ESPN3. An enticing week of Northeast Conference football awaits. Go forth and enjoy. And of course, thank you for watching the Whole 9 Yards. For NEC Front Row, I'm Ralph Ventre. I'll see you again next week.